All right, we have rolled this thing out. We've had a post-implementation review. We've had some periodic reviews. Let's talk about maintenance of this system or software. So when we are looking at system maintenance, there's almost certainly going to be change requests. And we need to make sure that the data itself also keeps its integrity and its confidentiality if that's our goal. So those are things that we're going to be looking at. Now, why would we have maintenance changes? There's always going to be patches, hot fixes, service packs, updates, new functionality added. I mean, there's always going to be that. Almost all vendors do that. If you home grow an application, you'll probably create updated versions that just work a little bit better or address this or that problem or weakness. Maybe there's also just a change in the IT business strategy. So we need to shift the direction of this application or this system. Maybe there was an audit that is requiring us to now put on security controls or change something. Now you've got to update this because there was no way to authenticate people. Or maybe we had some kind of hack or an intrusion and we need to respond to that. Or maybe the information has had its classification changed. The data here is now public as opposed to sensitive, or the data now has become confidential or personally identifiable, or the technology is changing and so everything needs to change. These are all reasons why we will want to have configuration changes and as part of the maintenance phase. So in the maintenance process, when we are looking at how the organization maintained this system, we want to ask ourselves, were any system changes really necessary? Did it match the needs of the organization? Did it go through an appropriate authorization process? Was it completely documented and tested before they just did it? You'd be amazed at how many system administrators just install something and they shouldn't. If it's a really small organization, then maybe that's okay, but a large one, it can cause all kinds of havoc. And ultimately, was it approved with the correct managerial oversight? We're going to ask all these questions as IS auditors. Now, folks, we've been looking at lots and lots of bullets and checklists. I tell you, these bullets are excellent references. When you do IS auditing or project management or both, use these checklists that you're seeing and just make sure that what you're doing does all of these things that we see in the bullets. Really, really excellent reference here. Sometimes you have applications or systems that require being certified or accredited. Like in the project I worked in, the clinics had to be credentialed in order to dispense HIV drugs. And so they had to be credentialed by our process and by training, and they had to prove a certain level of competency. So if that's the case, then there are some things that we need to be aware of. If this is a federally mandated accreditation, there's going to be a process. And so we want to make sure that we follow these so that the systems, they adhere to established procedures. And the process will be probably a formal one. And we want to make sure that all of the security requirements are well documented. This is why we have a formal credential or accreditation or certification process. We have right here for certification and accreditation. In the United States, we have the Federal Information Security Management Act, FISMA. We talked about it before, that all federal agencies have to have some kind of formal process before they put something into production, agency-wide, and they have to go through that process again every 3 years. Or you might have a situation where the certification is required and you have a technical evaluation of the security of the item. Or you might also have the certification of the technicians and the people who work with it, or the certification of the people who train it, or the certification of the people who use it. The idea of certification is this is a technical evaluation, whereas accreditation is management's formal acceptance of the adequacy of this system's overall performance or security. So certification and accreditation, you may have to go after that. And with accreditation, we have formal acceptance that this thing is adequate and suitable certification. We prove technical competence or technical ability. So here's an example of certification accreditation here. So we've got these formally established security requirements, well documented and authorized. And in the U.S. government case with certification, we have done a technical evaluation of our components of this system and its compliance with whatever the requirements are. And then accreditation management has formally accepted the adequacy of our system. In the CNA process, you'll start by initiation, and then you'll get certification and accreditation, and of course, there has to be regular recertification. When we are evaluating the maintenance process as a CISA, make sure that we do all of these things. Ensure that the change is acceptable. Make sure that there was approval given, proper approval given, that relevant documentation has been updated. How many times have I walked into a server room, I'm there to troubleshoot a problem, and now there are 5 new servers, I don't even know what they do. There's new patching, people have been throwing in WAPs and switches and other things, and the network map is not updated at all. Now that means I have to spend time just figuring out what this stuff does before I can get to the problem. So, IS folks, they actually hate updating documentation. But it's something that we have to stay on, otherwise we're going to waste time later. Make sure that if there was a change, we tested it, and that we didn't introduce any new vulnerabilities, and that there were no unauthorized changes. There are controls in place to disallow unauthorized changes, whether the controls are technical or procedural. If we go through certification and accreditation, that we followed the process if it is indeed required, and that we make sure that we know the standards, best practices, the guidelines, and for all of the relevant processes that we're looking at. So here is an excellent checklist for the CISA that is evaluating the maintenance process.